Dear ladies and gentlemen, welcome to our panel discussion today. Myself is Majd Sinan here. I will be your moderator for this panel discussion with our colleagues and friends who came with a huge background and a huge experience related to our topic today. As you know, we are discussing the methodologies to track and identify targeted activities from specific adversaries or specific hackers or attackers. And allow me to welcome our panelists today. So I will start with Mr. Sayed. Can you please introduce yourself in a few sentences to our audience?
Thank you very much. My name is Sayed Ali, and I'm the Chief Commercial Officer and co-founder at FishRod. And FishRod is about almost 6 years old company now. We're based out of US with a regional presence in the region. And we exist actually to develop the technologies that can help organizations to actually empower end users to gather threat intelligence, to develop, the whole campaigns related to phishing defense. That's what primarily we do.
Thank you, and welcome to our panel. Mr. Saeed, Mr. Muhammad Al-Tayyib from Vectra. Can you please introduce yourself and your company?
Assalamu alaikum, I'm Muhammad Tayyib. I'm the country manager for Vectra. Vectra is a US-based company specialized in artificial intelligence and the use of artificial intelligence in automating the threat hunting and identifying the cybersecurity threats in your network. And we have been in the region for a couple of years, and the company is almost 10 years old. And we help a lot in identifying the threats and automating the threat intelligence.
Nice meeting you, and thank you for joining us for today's panel. Mr. Nicholas, Group IB.
Hi, and thank you very much for having me on the panel. So Nick Palmer, I manage the global business at Group IB. In addition to that, I work very closely with our customers and make sure that the intelligence requirements are aligned with their expectations. Group IB, we focus on many different areas of cybersecurity for the last 17 years, very heavy on incident response and investigations. We understand at Group IB that every threat you're facing is there's a threat actor behind it. And I think that's going to be important for the panel discussion. So we focus on delivering threat intelligence, anti-fraud, network security, as well as different services as well, like incident response, compromise assessment, etc. We're new to the region. We've just got our first person on the ground and working closely with CyberKnight out of Dubai, but have plans to open up an office there very, very shortly. So more to come for us in the region.
Thank you, and welcome to the panel. Welcome to the region. Mr. Jost.
Hi, I'm Jost van Hest. I'm the Senior Vice President of Eclectic IQ, and we are a European cyber threat intelligence company, mainly focusing on our biggest product, which is a cyber threat intelligence platform, a TIP. But we also have an academy and a fusion center. We recently acquired a small EDR company with great technology, and it's called Polylogics. So you'll see us in the XDR space as well. We started in the region two and a half years ago, and we work closely with CyberKnight as well. So I hope to see you guys soon live in the region, because I'd love to be on the panel, but I also love to be in the region. Thank you.
Thank you very much for joining our panel today. Mr. Ian from Flashpoint.
Yeah, hi, my name's Ian Schenkel. I'm VP EMEA for Flashpoint. We've been around for about 10 years. We're US-based threat intelligence company. We look at everything from threat actors through to card shops, through to compromised credentials, able to find out who's behind the activism, whatever it may be, whatever the motivation is, and then able to feed that up to organizations so they can make use of that and put a kill chain in place. So yeah, great to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and welcome to our panel today. I will start with Mr. Ian again. Why it is important to know the methodologies, how to track and identify the attacker, and how we can specify this attacker profile, and why the organization care to know who is the attacker and what is his behavior.
Yeah, I think the key thing is to look at intelligence first of all. Intelligence has been around for a very, very long time. Mainly around military intelligence. So the more that you know about an adversary, an enemy, whatever you want to call it, the more you're able to make informed decisions. And that's all we've really continued on with. And instead of taking it from a theatre of war, we've taken it into the corporate environment. Understanding what a threat actor does, understanding what their MO, the modus operandi is, and what their sort of attack vector usually is really quite useful for preventing any further attacks from that actor, or being able to put defenses in place that are going to work, rather than just throwing mud at the wall and thinking, well, hopefully this will stop the threat actors coming in or stop them in their tracks. It's able to give you the context and why that threat actor is doing what they're doing, what their motivation is, and exactly how they intend to do the attack you as an organization. And most threat actors are braggers as well. They like to brag about what they've done. So being able to understand what they are looking to do, what they're trying to achieve, what tools they're trying to collect, also gives you that intelligence and insight into what you require.
Interesting, thank you. And Mr. Sayed, why it is important to the internal threat intelligence department in any organization care, and what is the role they should play on this area?
Yeah, thank you much for getting me on the discussion. I think this whole area about threat intelligence and this whole collective approach towards identifying the attack vectors and all that, I think this is very closely associated with two things. One is that how we get this intelligence, and the second part correlates to that how we use the people and the processes to make good use of that intelligence that we get. I mean, just if we take, let's say if I go back almost like 2 decades back, and we start talking about the evolution of technology, the organization would have, an antivirus in place, which then got replaced by the endpoint, the firewall, the IPS, the IDS, all these kind of wonderful technologies that we have had in place. They have been evolving, but so have the threat actors been. So what we personally believe at Fishrod is that threat intelligence that will be there. It's a prime. The kind of technology that we use, that is absolutely prime too. But how you make use of this threat intelligence cascaded to the people by the end of the day. For example, phishing has remained a constant problem for the last 20 years or so. And still there is no one who could guarantee that a phishing mail would not land into the end user mailbox. So it doesn't matter how much intelligence do you have, one of those phishing emails would certainly sneak into the mailbox. And then how do we tackle it? You have that people as you could use as an internal source of threat intelligence. So because whatever threat intelligence we are gathering from outside, that is absolutely critical. But once that fake simulated or phishing email or a suspicious email has landed into your mailbox, all that external threat intelligence that you have, that goes on the site. If the end users are capable enough to identify those threats, and you have the process in place to actually take an action upon that intelligence, may it be internal, may it be external. I think this is why we personally believe that the people, the process, and the technology part has to be gelled in when it comes to whether it's internal threat intelligence that you take from external feeds, or the internal threat intelligence that you get from your end users by making them aware, by empowering them to report suspicious emails, or for the matter of fact, any security incident. That's it.
Perfect, thank you very much. Mr. Muhammad Al-Tayyib, based on what Mr. Said mentioned now, it means that we need from this cyber security department in the organization be able to adopt detection approach, so they can define the attacker whenever he changes his attitude, his approach, his tools, his methodology. So what is your advice on this area?
Thank you for the question. Since like the attackers are changing the way they use the tools and the way they like do the attacks, we need to like automate the way and find different new ways of analyzing the information and move heavily more on using like the new technology like artificial intelligence in monitoring the behavior and the attacker behaviors, because if we depend on using the signatures, it's always like old and late. We need to start moving to the attacker behaviors and using the artificial intelligence in doing the analysis, because with the constraints on the current resources and with normally the threat hunting and those type of analysis need really highly skilled staff, and those people are like hard to find and expensive to keep. So the new way of handling this in enterprises is like adapting new technologies that will take use the artificial intelligence in doing this type of analysis, especially like those tools are being currently like deployed and using like third party like intelligence. There's different like tools currently available in the market that will make this much easier and much faster and will lessen the burden on the SOC team and the analysis team, since like the tactics that is being used in those attacks are well defined by third parties like MITRE ATT&CK. If you find a tool that will use those tactics to do the monitoring, it will be very fast and easy to identify the attacks and be able to monitor what's happening in your environment.
Yeah, interesting. Thank you very much. And I will move in my next question to Mr. Nicholas. Mr. Nicholas, what is your advice for the organization on the segmentation? Does it help to segment the actor and profiling the attackers? Where it will fit in our discussion?
Yeah, I think you've brought up a couple of interesting points. One is segmentation of the network. So most certainly gathering an understanding of what your landscape looks like today and what type of internal security controls you have is, I think basic fundamentals that need to be put in place. Further to that, I think a lot of my colleagues talked about cyber threat intelligence and really gathering an understanding of who the adversaries are. And this will really come when the organization starts to look at their intelligence collection requirements, speaking with the internal stakeholders and understanding what information is important to find out from their threat intelligence collection. Usually as part of this is to understand who your adversaries are. Maybe not their real identity, although I think there is importance to that, but who the attackers are, what TTPs they employ to try to gain access to either your organization or a friendly organization within your industry, and really understanding how threat actors first gain entry to the organization and what tools and techniques they'll use once they do get inside your organization will be critically important into actually understanding, what type of internal security controls you need to put in place, what type of isolation, maybe honeypots, et cetera, et cetera. So I think fundamentally it comes down to really identifying what your intelligence requirements are and then meeting those requirements by collecting information about your adversaries.
Interesting. Thank you very much. Mr. Jost, how we can mention in very high level what is the methodologies to identify and to track? Can we name it at very high level, give our audience an idea about those?
Yeah, of course we can. We can also talk about it all day or all week, but we can also do it very high level.
Yeah, I mentioned high level.
It's good that you mentioned that, because I can actually, I won't go down the rabbit hole. And a couple of methodologies that we should mention probably are well-known methodologies. I think that everybody kind of knows are, the cyber kill chain, if you want to track different threat actors, then of course you have to have multiple cyber kill chains that you need to follow up on a daily basis. My first steps into threat intelligence, my boss told me that data without context is not intel, and if you have evidence, it's also not intel. So you have to identify based on TTPs, and you can use MITRE-ATT&CK for that, for example, which is of course a knowledge base of a lot of TTPs, but you have to do it in the right way. Now, to make it specific, this is where the contextualization comes in place, something that we call link analysis, making sure that you have a better oversight of the ecosystem in which an attacker is working, is doing their bad activities. We usually use the diamond model for that, and the diamond model is something that looks very, very not detailed, but for that reason, it is actually quite hard to use. Now, I've heard a couple of things here that are very, very important. So before you can actually make it relevant and make it something that can actually be used in real life, you have to have that context, in my opinion. Now, a lot of the heavy lifting for aggregation and correlation can be done using artificial intelligence. And of course, what Nicholas said, making sure that you have your collection requirements. I think Ian will say the same thing, is very, very important, because if you have the wrong input, there will never be the right output. And the output, of course, is something that is the most important. So in terms of methodologies, just a summary, I think the diamond model is something that is very, very important. Of course, the MITRE-ATT&CK framework for TTPs and the cyber kill chain are a couple of methodologies that people should know a bit about and hopefully a lot more about in the future.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ian, based on your experience in the cybersecurity industry, and since you are working with a vendor who provides solutions to the organizations to secure and maintain their digital assets, how you address those organizations' stakeholders by advising them to build their own SOC center, build their own capacities, or offload all this kind of intelligence to somebody else? What is the best practice in this area, since the methodologies become very serious and this topic is not an easy for the normal cybersecurity engineer to know about it?
Absolutely, great question. So I think the first key thing is that there's not one size that fits all. Different organizations have different priorities. They have different levels of maturity. They may be very advanced in their cybersecurity strategy, their threat intelligence strategy, whatever that may be. Or they might be just beginning that journey as well. And it doesn't usually depend on the size of the organization, although typically we see larger organizations have much more maturity around the gathering of data, the making sure they're able to collate it, and make sense of it all. So I think the key thing is that it has to be very much a consultative. What are the biggest problems? What are the biggest things that are concerning that organization? Are they worried about compromised credentials from their employees? Do they have a lot of customers that, again, they are concerned about those customers being compromised? Right through to, are they concerned about keeping particular assets, within the organization, where they might be, cards, credentials, or anything like that. So the key thing really is to advise any organization is, what are their priorities? So, are they able to have a SOC internally? Are they able to have that level of, skill set that's internal that they'll require to keep running it, right through to are they able to ingest the intelligence and make sense of it? Because there's no point in having a whole lot of information and not having the people that are able to make sense of that. And then it's the third part of that is to see how are they able to package that up and put it in a usable, sensible sort of document or report or whatever it might be, and push that up to the board and to the management of the organization as well. That's the important part, because there's no point in giving that level of person, whether they're board or management, just a document that doesn't make any sense. It has to make sense. It has to be in layman's language, something they can understand, why they need to read that, why they need to invest more into it, and things like that. So it's a sort of forever evolving strategy that, like I said, one size doesn't fit all.
Thank you very much. It's to the point answer, and I'm counting on this answer and move to Mr. Sayed about the same organization, the same client who has built the capacity, who has built the team. What is your advice to him from building a database on the threats, on the profiling the hackers or the attackers? What you can say on this?
Yeah, I think I just could not agree more with Ian when it comes down to the whole the way he just explained about the role of SOC and all that. Now, as I mentioned earlier, that gathering this intelligence, that is just one part of the whole discussion. There are terms which are commonly known as, for example, proactive surveillance. I mean, that is something that you are doing on your adversaries to see that what they could potentially do to you. So for that purpose, you can have your SOC teams and all that, but the SOCs usually only see what is happening to the environment when it is only happening. The threat intels, they usually contribute in the larger context that what may happen to you, who is planning something on you, and to present it to the management. That's one part. Then there is a post-fact discussion too, that you have been gathering all that intelligence and you know that something may happen. The question is, when that thing happens, are you ready to make use of that intelligence to thwart that attack? This is where a lot of methodologies, a lot of technologies, a lot of controls come into the equation. A lot of these threats, we all understand, they come from, this email communication mode, phishing attacks, and all those kind of things. So in order to do that, though the reliance has to be there on getting external threat intelligence feeds, SOC could also do a role, based on whatever, they are seeing in terms of logs, in terms of correlating them and all that. But at the same time, a collection of repository of the past incidents and learning from them. That could also be maintained so that we know that, this is something that was predicted. This was something that happened. And when it has happened, this is how we block it. For example, just to give a scenario of one of our customers, we have this Reporter Outlook plugin which can contribute to end users reporting suspicious email. I mean, there were 10,000 mails were being reported on a daily basis by the end users that they are suspicious emails. Now, that's a hell lot of information going out to the SOC or the teams to monitor. If there would have been some kind of mechanism to actually filter those mails out, take those IPs out and learn from them. Now, what the customer there was doing, they were gathering that this is an IP from which those suspicious mails are coming. But how effectively and in real time, is there a mechanism that they are getting the feed that this is an IP, that is sending some malicious information? But how quickly can you block that IP as well? I think this is where this whole threat intelligence feeds, whether internal or external. If there is a mechanism to take action on that intelligence, I think this is where this whole scenario would make it more meaningful.
Thank you very much. Mr. Muhammad Al-Tayyib, we have built the team, we create the database, and we structure it in the right way. How can a certain technology, like example, encryption, it impact the identify and the track process, make it more complex, make it more complicated, make it more easier? What you can tell us about this?
I agree with the members of the panel, Ayan and Said, regarding like collecting all the information will help you know who's attacking you and what type of tools. This will enable you to put in the right controls in place and even try to like invest more in the different ways and different technologies that will help you. When we come to encryption, encryption has been a problem, and everyone knows that like about 70% of the traffic currently is being encrypted. There's all traditional tools that we can adapt, but those tools will be very expensive and hard to operate, which is like building having decryptors or implementing like some clients on some of the servers or endpoints to decrypt the traffic and know what's happening. The new methodologies that is being adapted currently, and the market is only monitoring the metadata, which will give you information about what's happening in this type of communication, and will give you information to detect and that there's something not right, or there's an attack going on. And those tools like will use you need to collect all the metadata of the network, and then you need to use like more sophisticated like software that will help you, especially the ones based on artificial intelligence. They can analyze this type of traffic and give you the indications that there's something going on. So when it comes to encryption, like there's no easy way, but we need to like either like invest heavily in the old tools, or we can go to the new methodologies and use like the new tools that will make it much easier and faster for the team, and it will automate the findings and even give you clear indications and of what's taking place, especially when we're going to like depend on the MITRE attack techniques in analyzing this traffic.
Great, thank you very much, Mr. Mohammed. Again, going back to Mr. Nicholas. Mr. Nicholas, without naming vendors, of course, focusing on the technology, what is the solid processes you recommend to have a proper automation for threat hunting processes?
Yeah, certainly. So I think my colleagues mentioned a lot about different artificial intelligence tools and things like this. We also had a discussion at the beginning where gathering an understanding of what your intelligence requirements are and leading to how you can track specific threat actors. That's kind of step one. Getting into step two and beyond is starting to be a little bit more proactive when it comes to a threat hunting perspective. So now you know who the attackers are, what TTPs they have. And you need to look both internally and externally to try and more proactively hunt for new threats. So for example, different advanced threat actors that used to target the Middle East, for example, Silence Group. They're a financially motivated threat actor group. And whenever they would create new infrastructure on their SSL certificates, they would make, I'm mentioning this because they don't anymore, they would make mistakes, or we would call them mistakes, in the way that they created SSL certificates. So in the common fields, they always used to put some organization, some city, some state. And these types of mistakes or clues can help you to either use technology or to proactively threat hunt externally yourself to identify more of the attacker's infrastructure. Because what you're seeing internally is really only half of the picture. For example, if you have an infected machine within your network and it communicates with a C2 server, it's great that you can use different tools internally to detect these types of things. But what about performing more proactive threat hunting external to the network using different DNS tools that you can find in open source or closed source from different vendors to look for more infrastructure that connects back to that original C2 server? Now you have a full list of more of that attacker's infrastructure and potentially can use that information, together with artificial intelligence and other internal security controls to see if perhaps you have a wider situation going on. And of course, you can use that information that you've gathered throughout proactive threat hunting to perform more internal threat hunting in your network. And like our colleague you said, we can talk about this for days or at a high level, but there's many different solutions on the market that can help you with these types of things.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jost, what is the threat modeling, and how we can fit it in this discussion.
So the diamond model that I was talking about, basically you can use for doing your threat modeling. I think what Nicholas just said is really important. If you model the threat, you will actually be able to have your team focus more on threat hunting than on doing the heavy lifting that can be done with tools. So if, for example, you use a workspace where you have your investigation and the rest of the team that works with you is contributing to that, you can use a whole bunch of different tools to contextualize whatever information you have from a threat actor. The intent that a threat actor has, that makes it specific. And we were talking about specific threats. The intent makes it specific. So you want to use the TTPs to get behind the intent. And then you want to make sure that, and that's a big part of threat modeling, making sure that you have the right TTPs, but also if there's new information flowing in, then you don't want to go through all of the information from all of the different tools that you have, of all of the different vendors that you have. You want to make sure that you, in a very intelligent way, just use the delta and add that delta to the investigation that you're doing. And again, all of this is where I think we kind of all agree, and especially what Nicholas just said, is this and Mr. Mohammed said the same. The SOC team has very little resources in terms of brains and a pair of eyes. So we need to make sure that these resources can focus on the most difficult things, and in my opinion, one of the most difficult things is actually doing the threat hunting activities, especially since now the attack surface has kind of blown up since COVID-19. Everybody's working from home. You actually have to extend your threat hunting activities to your VIPs working from home on the machine of their son or daughter. So it's even more important that you model your threats well, and do your investigations in a very intelligent way using the tools.
Great, thank you very much. I think we are running out of time, so I will wrap up by giving the opportunity to you to add your recommendations, your advice to the stakeholders in any organizations or to our audience. Can we start with Mr. Ian?
Yeah, thanks. I think one of the key things really is to get the senior people involved, have the board involved, have the senior management involved, and any sort of threat strategy, threat intelligence, whatever we want to put it, the overall cybersecurity strategy needs to be something that's bought in by the whole lot, because the reality is if there's no buy-in from the senior level, then the budgets are going to be looked at, et cetera, et cetera. So therefore, getting that buy-in and not having that finger pointing when and if something does happen, if it's a major breach or whatever it may be, I think is the key part. So ensuring the senior execs understand at a fairly fundamental level, not at in-depth technical level, what is required, why it's there, and what they need to use going forward.
Thank you very much. Mr. Said Ali?
Yeah, I think Ian has very nicely put together when it comes down to the support and the resources that are required. But I would again quote Ian when he started in the beginning that it's more like in a warfare kind of mode that we gather the intelligence. But the dilemma with cyber threat intelligence is that even as much as we know that who are the threat actors, what they are doing, what they intend to do to us, we cannot do a counter launch on them. I mean, that's the dilemma of every organization, that that they are planning, they would attack us. In a normal scenario, we would. But if we can't do that, the best we could do is to prepare ourselves in a sense that we not only have the technology in place, but we also have a process. For example, if we do know that that a particular threat is coming from an X actor or an X IP or an X source, how quickly can we thwart that attack? Do we have a process in place that once the feed comes in, we could immediately take an action, and at the same time the people are also on board so that they can contribute to a proactive threat intelligence? Thank you.
أخي محمد, Mr. Muhammad طيب, So a few words for our audience to take it
I
with
agree
them from
with
this event.
Ryan and Sayed. Taking the support from the senior management is very crucial. I encourage all enterprises and especially the cybersecurity teams to consider taking advantage of the new tools available in the market, especially the ones based on artificial intelligence, to maximize the use of the threat intels they have, and even to maximize their time in identifying and being to find all ongoing threats in their environment. Since doing the manual way or using the manual way, it will consume a lot of time and resources from their which it's very hard for them to find.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nicholas.
I think, yeah, thank you very much. I think I'd summarize in just a couple of points of where I see things going into the future. I think there's, a lot of good sources to meet your intelligence collection requirements, and, collecting information about your the threat actors that you face is, a good place that you want to be in the organization. I think what comes next is to really focus on external threat hunting, trying to uncover more of the attacker's infrastructure, and then use that information in your internal security controls to do internal threat hunting as well. And to the second point that I'd like to mention is after proactive threat hunting and gathering a closer understanding of who your adversaries are and the infrastructure that they use to attack you, attribution is a real thing that can help to actually disrupt cybercriminal operations. So actually taking the next step to research these cyber criminals, to uncover a real name and a face to these individuals that are adversaries to you, and to work with your local law enforcement and international law enforcement to bring these cyber criminals to justice, I think is where the industry will go in the coming steps. And like my colleague said, it won't be hacking back by any means, but it will be a joint effort by policing organizations, vendors, and private industry to identify who these adversaries are and ultimately bring them to justice.
Justice. Yeah. Thank you. Well said, Mr. Jost.
Thank you. Being the last, it's hard to add intelligent remarks here. I think share would be the thing that I would want to add. Of course, it's difficult to share very detailed information, but it will most definitely help to share, for example, information on investigations anonymized that are not too detailed, and also the course of actions that were successful, especially also in the threat hunting activities, where it's not something that is done easily. So sharing, disseminating partially, or disseminating full investigations, and share information around how you successfully worked your way around a campaign, for example. Share.
Well said. Thank you very much. And finally, I would love to take this opportunity on behalf of our audience and the event organization to thank you for being with us in this panel session, and to educate us and enlighten us with your experience, and to share with us your knowledge, and let us know more about how we can make the world secure and safe place from digital perspective. Thank you very much. Have a nice day, and I'm very pleased to meet you all. Looking forward to meet you again. Thank you.
Thank you. See you in person soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.